Hello, this is Lon Safko, author of the Social Media Bible here for Extreme Digital Marketing. And we're talking in this video segment about beyond demographics, getting in sync with your audience. And the importance of this to Extreme Digital Marketing is really understanding your demographics from all different angles. Even more particularly than demographics, and we're going to describe exactly what the term demographic means and give you lots of examples. But I'm also talking about psychographics, the psychological hot buttons. What's going on in your demographics head at the time that you touch them, that you contact them with your offer. And we're going to talk about micro demographics, and that is dividing demographics down into even smaller segments. The smaller segments you can divide it down to, the more accurately you can define the psychographics, and the more successful your conversion rate is going to be. So let's jump into this thing here. Okay, that being said, let's talk about some of the major demographics. One of the major demographics tools are age groups. And if we look at the 7 major categories, and I bet you didn't even know there were 7 major categories. You've got matures, that's the older ones. You've got the baby boomers, that's where the largest single population segment that the world has ever seen exists, and that took place right after World War II. Generation Jones, keeping up with the Joneses. Generation reruns, you see that. Generation X, I don't know that it was exactly exceptional, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. Generation Y and millennials. And the good thing about these type of demographics is that you can look at each one of those and you can make some assumptions. Yeah, they're generalizations, but generally they're true. So let's take a look at baby boomers, for example. If you're marketing to baby boomers, the first thing you need to know is that that's the largest single demographic segment that has ever pushed its way through marketing in the 6,000 years that we've been doing marketing. Another thing is true is that for the most part, they're either completing their careers, which means that their earning potential right now is the highest that it's ever been in their lives. They're making more money right now than they ever have. They're also probably empty nesters. Kids are out of the house, which means they probably have more disposable income than they've ever had, or they're just recently retired, in which case they may be on a fixed income, but they generally have some type of a nest egg that they can draw from. So you can make those assumptions. You can also assume that some of them, probably most of them, are on Facebook. Few of them are on Twitter. Very few of them use the mobile telephone as a primary source to stay in touch with other people, other than just phone calls. I'm talking about text messaging and Twitter and some of the other techniques that can be used on mobile. See, so if you look at the baby boomer demographic, you can get a pretty good idea where they are at any given time of the day, what they're doing, what they're thinking, what their lifestyles are, what their acceptance to technology is, what their financial background. And that's why we use demographics, so that we can get all of this general information. But the cool thing is that if we can go beyond demographics, we can get into the weeds and we can really take it down even further. And as you look through this, a lot of people think that Generation Y and millennials are really great with social media. Please don't be fooled with that. They certainly know how to use a cell phone and they're not afraid of technology, but trust me, they do not have the 20 and 30 years of marketing and sales experience to draw from. So don't let them loose with your social media. They may know more about the technology, but they just don't have the experience that a baby boomer has. So that's why you have to be careful of misinterpreting these over generalizations. Okay, so let's take a look at the definition of demographics. What demographics refers generally to is age, sex, income, education, race, marital status, size of the household, geographic location, etc. You know the categories. And again, if you can segment, if you can divide up your prospect and customer base into nice, easy to look at little categories, you can make some gross generalizations of how best to communicate with them. But again, don't be fooled. We're going to get deeper into this. Now, where can you actually get demographics on your particular customers? Well, it's not so easy really just to go out and buy them, because every product, every company, every service is different, and your demographics are going to be skewed. They're going to be a little bit different. Even the different products that you sell within a company or the different services that you offer are going to slightly skew your demographics. So where's the best place to get them? Well, get them from your actual customers. Take a look at your customers, look at their geographic locations. You got them in a database, especially if you do business online. All of that information is stored in a database. Pull it up, look at it, do a geographic representation across the United States. Put it in an Excel spreadsheet, divide it up. Look at your suppliers. They may have some demographics because they're supplying to other companies, and they have to know what they're B2B, but their B2B customers are actually B2C, and they have to know who the actual end user is going to be. And then go to your potential customers. We can do surveys. We can ask them questions about who they are. And I'm going to get into surveys and how to actually gather that information. You can look to your employees, consultants, surveys, focus groups. So there's actually a lot of places that you can get very, very specific information, not just general demographics, but actual demographics of who your specific customer is. And that's a heck of a lot more accurate than demographic information based on a census bureau or who you think your customers are. Because trust me, if you actually go out and survey your customers, you're going to find information that you never knew. And I'm telling you, that's the truth. So I'm going to suggest that early on here. So there are secondary sources that you can look to get good demographic information. For example, the census report. Coming up here real soon, it's going to be the best information that we've seen in over a decade. The problem is the census only really takes accurate count information on everything once every 10 years. It updates information occasionally, and it interpolates. It will take the 2000 numbers and look at the trends over the last 10, 20, 30 years and try to guess what 2009 is going to look like. Every year that you get further away from the 10-year census date, the numbers get worse and worse because they're guessing. You can guess 2001 fairly accurate, 2002 not so accurate, and by the time you get out to 2009, you're pretty much skewed. So the good news is that 2010 was a recent census year, so the information that's now coming out of Washington is going to be really, really good, fresh information. Economic and production data, news organizations, trade associations. You know, trade associations is a really good place, associations and publications, and the reason is that they generally have a huge membership base. They're all in your trade, so you have something in common, and they often compile demographic information on their user base, and they'll make that available to other members either for free or usually for a small fee. So don't write that off. And in whatever trade you're in, you probably have at least 1, 2, 3, or even possibly 4 different associations and publications that's going to have that information available to you. So take a look there. And basic research, I mean, look for demographic research publications. You can find a lot of that stuff online. And then you can also go to large external measurement services such as AC Nielsen. Nielsen has got amazing information. Burke and Information Resources, Burke and Information Resources Inc. and other government publications. And don't forget about Gartner, the Gartner Group, and Forrester. They do some absolutely incredible research. So, but unfortunately, with those groups, as with Nielsen, that information is very expensive. Some reports will cost you anywhere from $500 to $5,000, but they're great, they're good, and they're worth every penny of it. Even if a report cost you $5,000, but you can get just one insight that increased your close rate by 30%, what would that do to the bottom line of your company over the next year? So sometimes it doesn't pay to be cheap up front when you can actually benefit from it in the long run. Now, there's 2 different types of data that we're looking at when you talk about demographics. One of them is quantitative data. Those are numbers. Those are percentages. They're quantities. It's big picture stuff. But the good thing about that quantitative data is that you can manipulate it. You can put it into an Excel spreadsheet. You can graph it, as you see in the top right. You can do percentages. You can look for trends. That's really important to have a good set of qualitative data if you're trying to forecast. The other problem, though, with quantitative data is that if you have somebody that lied on a survey, not only did the category that they were supposed to be put in for all of their questions all of their questions, every category that their correct answers were supposed to be put in, were not put in, but in fact those were actually put into a different category that it didn't belong in. So all of those categories with the wrong information are incorrect, and all of the categories that are missing the correct information are incorrect. And that's part of the problem, is that just one wrong number knocks off two different categories and can skew all of your numbers. So getting good quantitative data is really important. The integrity of the data is important, or otherwise it just throws everything off.
When you think about it, 12:15 p.m. is actually 11:75 a.m.
And of course, that's George Carlin, and I used George Carlin and Stephen Wright in my presentations quite often. And the reason is that they look at things differently. They turn things around, they turn them upside down. Now, honestly, what he just said, yeah, isn't that quarter after the hour is the same thing as 75 minutes after the same hour? Yeah, it kind of makes sense. He looks at things completely from the opposite side, as does Stephen Wright. Listen to those. They're considered cerebral comedians. And I love their stuff. And I play them because I want you to start thinking that way. Look at things differently. Look at them from 180 degrees. Look at them from the back. Look at them from the underside. Turn them around, because often, almost always, not only are you going to find additional information, but that's where you're going to find the solutions. They're there, but they're just hidden in the information. Now, qualitative data, that is the touchy-feely perceptions, insights, the psychological subtleties, what motivates customers, the psychological hot buttons, what they're thinking, why are they doing what they're doing, when are they doing it, how are they doing it, what caused them to do it. And honestly, I find this part more fascinating than the quantitative, because if I could know when my customer is ready to buy and I can contact them, I can touch them at that point with the right message, I got a 100% conversion rate. And we're going to talk about the psychological hot buttons. Also, in Extreme Digital Marketing, there's other videos out there where I talk specifically for an entire hour just about the psychological hot buttons, what motivates people. So if you like this side of demographics and marketing, then take a look for some of the titles that have psychological in it. Also, okay, how do we get demographic information that you need specific? Well, you can look at your consumers, your customers, you can look at your prospects, you can look at your suppliers, networking and associations. This is kind of a little quick list of what we've talked about. Anybody who puts out newsletters may or may not have some information. Annual reports. I don't know if you're familiar with Edgar, EDGAR. It's a website that actually provides all of the 10Ks and 10Qs of the Securities Exchange Commission traded companies, and there's tens of thousands of them. So say, for example, if you wanted to see what the annual report for Coca-Cola was, which is huge, that's your 10K. If you want your 10Q, which is a quarterly report, quarterly updates, you just go to Edgar. And what you'll see is that they talk often about their demographics. So if there's a company that's publicly traded, take a look at their 10Ks particularly and glance at their 10Qs and see if there's any demographic information in there. Go to edgar.com and look for that information. It's really absolutely amazing too, the insights that you can get from a 10K or a 10Q of a Fortune 500 company. And then of course sometimes newspapers and publications have all of these demographics. For example, the business journals keep really good track of the top 100 largest companies in every category. I mean, they're really good about sorting information out. So remember the business journals and also the regular newspapers. And then do your own research. Be your own customer. Just get out there and talk to customers. Set up a suggestion box. Now that could be a brick and mortar type suggestion box if you have a brick and mortar location, or that can be click here to give us your opinions right on your website. Ask your customers. Don't be afraid of what they say. Too many times companies won't ask or are afraid to talk to their customers because I always say, what if they say something mean? Well, you know what? If they say something mean, fix it. And then you're perfect. Listen, take it as constructive criticism. What if they say something nice? What if they tell you why they bought your product? What if they told you what in your marketing actually worked? Does that have any value? especially when you apply that to your prospects, you better believe it. So listening to your customers is amazing. And you can do pre-purchase questions. You see that online a lot of times, especially if you're going to download a white paper or something. They ask you all kinds of questions. I'm not suggesting ask all kinds of questions, but just before the person buys your product, while they're in the buying cycle itself, ask a couple of questions, get some really good market insights, and post-purchase surveys. Right after your customer buys something, get them at that point. If you're brick and mortar, or if you're bricks and clicks, or if you're just clicks, it's appropriate. For example, if you have a brick and mortar location, you know what? Put a little index with 5 questions on it. The 5 most important things that you would want to know why your customer actually bought your product. And then when you give them the receipt, give them the index card and a pen and ask them to please just answer the 5 quick questions. They'll do it. You know why? Because they're engaged. They're engaged in your product. They're engaged in your brand. They're excited. The endorphins are flowing. The serotonin is flowing. The adrenaline is flowing. They're high on drugs. So get them while they're high. Ask them while they're still excited about your product. Every minute that you wait after the actual sale, those drugs are going to dissipate. So if you send them an email the following day, forget it. They're not going to respond. So either do it just before they close the transaction or just immediately right after. What does it cost? And it's not going to take any time, and it's going to give you amazing insights at the very moment that that transaction happens. That's what you want. So tips for post-purchase demographics. I think you can see that I'm a little bit passionate about capturing that information at that time. As a rule, the most quantitative information you ask, the less truthful it generally will be. And think about that. Unless you explain why you're asking the questions, people want privacy and will fudge the truth. Think of that. If you're hanging out with the guys and they ask you, well, how much did you make last year? You're going to pad it a little bit, yeah, probably. And if you don't think that asking for quantitative information that they're going to lie, just ask a woman her age. I'm just waiting for the laughter to die down here. Okay, I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah, that's not fair. Okay, we'll ask her weight. Yeah, okay. So now you're kind of getting what I'm saying is that people often in quantitative data will lie to make themselves look good. And the same is true with focus groups. You can't trust the information that comes back generally from focus groups because they know that whoever's paying for the focus group is looking for positive answers. Those people are being paid by that company, so they have a tendency to skew towards the positive. So, see, you got to be careful of gathering this information.
Let's give credit where credit is due and admit
that Scotch tape was a really great invention, and for some reason he didn't finish that. Let's move on. Keep your questions short to ensure privacy. Well, there's actually 3 parts to this when I look at this. It's keep your questions short, keep the number of questions in your list short, and absolutely guarantee privacy. Let's talk about the 3 of those. Keep your questions short. Yeah, if you can make checkboxes or radio buttons, that's really what you're looking to do. Please don't make essay questions, 500-word answers. Keep it as simple as possible because remember, every time someone answers a question and goes on to the next one, they've got a choice to hit delete, the back button, or throw the index card back down on the counter and walk away. So you got to make it easy for them. And keep the number of questions to a minimum. I mean, there's some surveys that I've gotten into that are 20 and 30 minutes long. Hey, and if I'm not getting paid, if you're not paying me for the time that I spend, I mean, I get so much an hour for consulting. So why should I give you my insights, spend an entire half an hour, or 15 minutes, or even 5 minutes? I say, if it's a half-hour survey, you figure out what I get an hour, cut it in half, and that's what my time is worth. How much do you get paid per hour on your job? So if you do a 15-minute survey and the company is benefiting from it, then you need to get paid a quarter of what your company pays you. It's only fair. But people always ask for surveys for free. So be sure, and we're going to talk about this remuneration, so be absolutely sure that you make it as easy as possible if you're not paying your customers. And you can pay your customers with lots of things. I mean, you can pay them with a chance to win an iPod. A nano iPod has almost no cost at all, and people do crazy things to win an iPod. Honest to goodness, you wouldn't believe it. So keep the list of questions, keep the amount of time to a minimum, and assure privacy. I mean, unless you're out here deliberately capturing this information to sell it and to distribute it all over the internet, which you're not. You're going to use it for just for your own information. Then tell your customers. Tell them that it's not going to be shared. Tell them you're not going to sell it. Tell them you're not going to abuse it. Tell them that they have the ability to opt out at any time. People want to know that if they give you information, that that information is going to be respected, and you're going to respect the relationship that you now have with that person who gave you that information. And then number 3, focus on the qualitative questions to yield the real demographic gold. Focus on the qualitative, the psychological. Ask more of those kinds of questions. Why did you come into my store today? What made you decide to buy? I mean, it might have been price, it might have been packaging, it might have been the lighting, it might have been the music. So there's a lot of information that you can get by looking at the psychological answers more so than the actual numbers. Number 4, check box on a postage paid postcard. I mean, yeah, that's a little brick and mortar. That's a little bit old school, but that'll work. I mean, just send out a postcard, prepay the postage, and just a couple of check boxes. I mean, you'd be surprised if you ask for people's help. By the way, ask for help. Use those exact words. When you use the word help, almost never can anybody turn you down. They almost always agree. And again, that's pretty easy. You know, do the check boxes, maybe do one fill-in question, and just stick it back in the mail. That's all you're asking. Or do a web survey. SurveyMonkey is an amazing tool where you can set up online surveys. They can be really sophisticated. They can be very simple surveys, and it's free. So look at online surveys. But again, offer something in exchange for the time that your customers are going to spend. And it's only just a few clicks. Stay away from the essay questions if you can help it. Sometimes for the real psychological information, you really want to have essay questions. You want to hear what they have to say. But do it quickly from the time that they actually buy. Then you get better results. And as it says here, the elated buyer will generally have more patience in answering questions. While the endorphins, while the adrenaline, while all of those different brain chemicals are circulating around, that's when they're engaged in your brand. They're happy with their decision, they're confident, and they'll help you. So post-purchase questions, much better accuracy than you can get any other way. And number 6, never ask unnecessary questions. Do you really need to ask them their mother's maiden name or God forbid a social security number? You know what? Stay away from that. Don't ask any questions that are not absolutely pertinent. Unless you're planning on doing a direct mail piece, don't ask for their address. What do you care? Unless you're going to mail them something, honestly, what do you care? If it's important later on and you didn't capture the information, then you can ask them later. You can send out an email or just a query. Can I send you something in the mail? Can you give me your address? But if you try to get 15, 20 different pieces of information up front, they're going to bail. They're not going to give it to you. So when I collect my demographic information, you know what I collect? First and last name. That way when I email them or if I contact them anyway, at least I know what their name is. So that's pertinent. Their email address, because I don't contact anybody other than through extreme digital marketing, mostly email and social networking. And I ask for their zip code because you know what? If you give me your zip code, I've got you narrowed down where you are anywhere in the United States within a half of a city. Think about that. Every city has got multiple zip codes, or the city's small enough only to have one. So I've got you pretty well nailed down to a very small geographic area if I want that geographic information. But keep in mind, I only asked 4 questions. First name, last name, email, and geographic location. And never, 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 never ask personal information like social security numbers or anything, even mother's maiden name, because that's usually associated with financial institutions. And that will scare the heck out of people because they're thinking that you're gathering personal information because maybe there's some fraud involved. And fraud happens quite a bit. This weekend somebody got a hold of last Friday, of my debit card number somehow. I've been traveling and next thing I know, my corporate account was cleaned out. Now, the nice thing is the bank always stands behind that, puts the money back in, backs out all of the overdraft charges. But you know what? I got burned. That happens. So next time I'm going to be a little bit sensitive who has access to my debit card. And the same goes for this information. You don't want that warning alarm to go off. Remember, nowadays with all of the media and all of the online transactions, today's customers are no longer consumers, they're prosumers. They're not consumers, they're prosumers, professional consumers. They're sophisticated, so respect that. And number 7, if your demographic analysis demands sensitive information, if it has to have sensitive information, be sure that the gift you're offering is perceived value. To the person answer. Okay, think of it as a balance, as a scale, a balance. And you're asking your customer to come in and spend time. Just like when you ask them to spend money on the sale, you ask them to spend time. So they're going to take what their perception of that amount of time is, especially if it's a long survey or it requires a lot of information that they don't normally like to give up. So they're going to take all that inconvenience and the actual time that they spend, they're going to associate it with how much they get paid an hour at work, and they're going to put it on one side of the balance. What are you going to put on the other side of the balance? Thank you. And anytime somebody calls me up and says, "Hi, could you please participate in a 15-minute survey?" First question I ask is, "What do I get?" "What do you mean?" "Well, how much are you paying me?" "Well, we can't pay you." "Why should I spend 15 minutes, a quarter of my hour, giving you my personal information if you're not going to give me anything in return? Why should you benefit and I should lose?" "Well, it's going to make us a better company so that we can sell better to you." So again, I'm not planning on buying from your company, and if I will, I'll take my chances. So you're going to make more money off of the information that I give you, and I still don't get anything. Well, then about that time you usually hear a click. But those are legitimate questions. Give your customers something. Give them a white paper. Give them some value. Give them a free app. Give them a chance to win an iPod. And again, people do crazy things, not even for the iPod, just for the chance of winning an iPod. And an iPod Nano is pennies. You can get them really inexpensively. So give away 3 iPods. What is it going to cost you? $150? And people will take the time and give you good information. But don't just expect that your customer is going to spend something that, or that they're going to give you something for free without getting something in return. It's not reasonable. Now, if you look in the top right hand corner, if you give away one of these, I will take your survey. And what I would like you to do, please, if you decide to do a survey and you're going to give one of these away, contact me first. But the point is offer something of equal or greater value in exchange for the time and the hassle of actually taking that survey. That's really important. If you want good information, you got to pay for it. If you ask people to do it for free, there's no vested interest. There's no reason why they should be accurate. So they're going to give you garbage. You're going to get what you pay for. And number 9, remember what you're giving could be tied to, what if you had a product that had a 90-day warranty and you doubled it? Well, if your product isn't going to last for 6 months, then you know what? You shouldn't be in business. But the perception is if I'm going to double your warranty, you got almost 100% chance that's not going to cost you anything, but there's going to be a high perceived value for your customer. What if you threw in a set of cheap batteries or a set of filters or some kind of an accessory that has very low cost? What if you threw in a white paper, a case study? What if you did a case study of your customers, how they actually benefited and how they came up with unusual ways to use your product or your service? I mean, these are things that are going to benefit your customers. So think of ways that you can provide value that doesn't have a real high cost of goods to you. Okay, does that make sense? Low cost of goods, something like a virtual product like a white paper or something that they can download is really the best. But also corporate specialty advertising items are really cool. I mean, that's a $15 billion industry. What do you got hanging around in the closet? Do you have a calculator or I don't know, a really nice pen with your name on it? You know what? You're giving them away at trade shows for nothing. Why don't you make it part of the prizes that you're giving away for doing a survey? And if you got researchers, if you're going to hire kids to go out, or if you're going to hire a company, you know what? You got to make it really clear that the information's got to be based on quality, not quantity. Because you know what? If you hired me and you never made it really clear, I could go out and I could actually just sit in the park and fill them out myself and come back an hour later. So if you want quantity, man, I can get it for you. But if you want quality, that's different. Then that means I'm going to have to take my time. I'm going to have to make sure that each one is filled out properly. And otherwise, the information is going to get skewed. And remember, we talked about that. One quantitative piece of information in the wrong place knocks off 2 different categories. So barriers to research. For many businesses, the options are unknown. The answers to questions may not give us positive results. So businesses, probably you and your company, are not comfortable doing research, talking to your customers, asking the right questions. So be sure you ask the right questions. And a lot of people are just afraid of it because you think your customers are going to say something mean. Get over it. And by the way, you don't have to do big mathematical equations. Sometimes just looking at the data, sometimes just graphing the data, simple Excel stuff is going to reveal some amazing information. So like we said before, the two most broadly defined formal research methods are qualitative and quantitative. And what you want to do when you create your questions for your demographics and you start asking these questions on your surveys, make sure you have a good balance of both. Generally, start out with your quantitative, your numbers, real simple, so they're kind of whipping right through them. Then slap in a couple of qualitative, some psychological questions. But again, keep it as short as possible, but try to get a good balance of both, because you can see that both of these types of information are going to yield different types of results. And you can do telephone surveys. You got your telephone numbers for your customers? Well, you know what? Call them up, introduce yourself. You have a trusted relationship. Here's the difference. You're not a telemarketer. You're not calling up, bothering them at dinner. You're calling them up because you have a relationship with them and you need their help. So call them up and ask them, why did you buy? What made you buy? What did you like? What didn't you like? What can we have done better? What did you think of the showroom? What did you think of the website? Was it intuitive? Did the buying process, was it easy? A lot of great questions. Social networks. Use Twitter. You can send out questions on Twitter and get huge responses. Put it on your Facebook page. Put a link to a SurveyMonkey thing right on your Facebook page. Why not? Blog about it. Blog about why it's important to you to stay in touch and keep your finger on the pulse of your customers. Write it in a blog and direct them over to a SurveyMonkey. And then, of course, SurveyMonkey. And have a questionnaire. And you can mail them. Be ethical. Tell people ahead of time. Have a little privacy policy written right on your survey. And make sure that all this information goes into a database where you can manipulate it, where you can pull that information out later. And check your existing databases for that information. So there's other things like focus groups. And again, you heard me mention earlier, I've done a lot of focus groups, and I'm not crazy about them. I'm not crazy about the results. First of all, you have to hire a company that can do focus groups, because they have to have like a police lineup room where you got a conference table on one side of a double-sided mirror. Then you got another place where you can kind of peer at them from behind, and video and audio tape. And then you got to bring the people in. You got to pay them. That's expensive. And as I said earlier, most of the time when you bring somebody in to test a product, they're going to get paid, or they're going to get something out of it. So they have a tendency to skew in favor of the company or the product. So you might get some good results out of it, but generally, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. I think the expense and the validity of the information, I just doesn't. I don't think it works out equally. But yeah, go ahead. But show up at trade shows. Trade shows are great places because they're talking about products and services, and everybody from your industry is there, and you're probably stuck being there anyway. Direct response means getting face time with likely prospects. Ask them. Walk around the trade show and ask your customers, hey, could I ask you 5 quick questions? I promise. It's just going to be quick. And ask them. And you can get a couple of hundred of those things with a clipboard. Another thing that I did was when I was testing products for my company, I was testing product names in particular. And I remember this one time I was in LAX and I had a little bit of time before my plane boarded, and I grabbed my pad out of my briefcase and I just went around for the people. Hey, there's 150 people sitting in my area, and I just went over and I said, can I ask you a couple quick questions? And everybody's like, oh yeah, sure. And you know what? I filled that yellow pad with answers, and I had some of the best information that I ever gotten. And I grabbed that right at the airport in between flights. So it's really easy. If you think about it, if you really want to gather this information, there's some really great places where you can get it. Now, demographics, let's take a look at, start getting into the weeds a little bit. As I mentioned before, traditional demographic information is age, sex, political affiliation, marital status, family size, education, geographic location, where you work, what you do for a living, what your title is, what your annual income is, how many kids you have, do you have dogs, whatever. I mean, there's a ton of general traditional information that they ask. And again, ask the type of questions that are pertinent to your customers. Whether or not they have dogs may or may not be important. If For example, if you're a pet shop, you're going to want to answer that question. If you're a Honda dealer, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be important. So think about the type of questions. Don't just take them for granted. Now, some of the non-traditional, and here's the ones that I like. Here's where you really start getting into the psychological weeds. And you got to be careful asking some of these. You may want to phrase them differently. But leisure activities, what do you do in your spare time? Now, if you're a Honda dealer, that might be important because if you spend a lot of time outdoors, you got SUV written all over you. So I've already narrowed down the entire product line to my SUVs. So leisure activities could be important. Sexual orientation, be careful with that, but that might tell you something. Recreational pastimes, fashion sense, shopping fetishes, whether you're a gourmet cook or if you like wine, your peer groups, what do you do when you travel, what sports do you play, your eating habits, decision-making style, are you aggressive, are you a passive, are you a do-it-yourselfer, again, pet or animal lover. I mean, there's a whole bunch of information that you can ask. When you start asking these pieces of information and you start getting into the weeds, now we're looking at micro demographics, because think about this for a second. Over in the left-hand column, it says what your age is, okay, and where you live. But now I'm over here and I find out, you know what, you're a gourmet cook, you have 2 dogs, and you love to camp. Whoa, I've got some really good intel on you right now. And if that's my demographic, I could do a killer campaign just on those 3 pieces of information. Now, let me give you another example. Look over on the right-hand side. We're starting to talk now about micro demographics, which is a phrase that I termed. So don't look up micro demographics on the internet. It's just what I call it. But what's a dink? What's a dink? I'm going to give you a second. Now, if you're in marketing, you should know all the different marketing terms. It's not ringing a bell, is it? Dink. Double income, no kids. Double income, no kids. Now, what does that micrographic tell you? To me, it tells me a lot. First of all, the first definition of a dink, double income, no kids, tells me that it's a male, female, married couple that are both professional. They decided not to either have kids at all or not to have kids for now because they're working on their careers. They're career oriented. They've made a decision not to have kids. Okay, that's one part of that demographic. But what's the other part? Homosexual couples. For the most part, unless they adopt, I mean, by definition, those are going to be double income, no kids. Because almost always, if there's no kids, both of the individuals in the couple work, so that's double income, and because they're homosexual, there's not going to be any kids involved unless they bring them in from the outside. So, okay, so what does that mean? Well, you know what? If that's your demographic, I mean, isn't there volumes of inferred information that you can get from knowing that a major part of your demographic is a dink? See? That's what I'm talking about, is pulling out those nuggets of gold, that really important information about how your customer actually thinks. So, in typical definitions of demographics, lifestyle refers to the collective choice of hobbies, recreational pursuits, entertainment. How do you live? What do you do? Generally, it refers to non-work time pursuits. And a value system includes religion, beliefs, political, nationalistic, cultural values. So that's your belief and value system. And your life stage refers to the chronological benchmarking. And you saw that. First of all, you saw the main 7 categories that we use in demographics, but there's also chronological benchmarking, and it doesn't necessarily fit neatly into those 7 categories. Preteens, teenagers, empty nesters. I'm just going to talk about just those 3. Preteens, got to be careful when you market to them because they're preteen, so you got to have extra security, you got to have parents' permission and parents' participation. But you know what? If you look at the Penguin Club and some of the other preteen websites, oh my gosh, and Disney, absolutely amazing. Teenagers have a huge disposable income. I mean, look at the malls. That's who's spending the money it's the teenagers at the malls. I mean, and look what they're buying. They're fashion, CDs, sunglasses. I mean, really. But that doesn't necessarily fit into one of those 7 categories. Empty nesters. Remember, empty nesters was part of the baby boomers and most of the matures. See, so there's a different way of looking at it. And that's what I want you to do, is I want you to look at it differently. Because if you're a baby boomer and you're mature, you may have different demographic characteristics. If you're an empty nester, which crosses both of those categories, you know what? That's a whole completely different set. I just recently became an empty nester, and my wife and I joke that if we knew how good it was going to be, we'd have thrown our kids out years ago. It's wonderful. Our lifestyle had changed completely for the better. We love our kids. We love our kids. But if we knew how good it would have been, we would have asked them to leave years ago. Okay, best formula. Best formulas. If you're a geographic location based company, meaning that you're a brick and mortar, or you only sell in your county, you only sell services or products in your county or your city or your state, geographic area, then that's important. But even though you may be not so much bricks but clicks, and you're selling across the entire country, geographic location may still be important. The reason is for example, one of my companies is a company that sells online school projects. And basically what you do is you put in your credit card. You can do it 24 hours a day. You can do it at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. That's when we get most of our sales. And it's educational products. And let's suppose that your child's got to do a report on the White House, or the Capitol building, or the Alamo, or the California Spanish missions, or Mount Rushmore, or any of 100 different school projects. Put in your credit card, a PDF downloads to your desktop, you fire up your printer, you print a couple of pages, you got your history so you can write your report, you got a photograph of the finished product, and you got some pages, and you cut them out, you fold them, little glue, scissors, and the next thing you got is an architecturally true replica of the Alamo, or an architecturally true replica of the White House or the Capitol building, or a DNA molecule, or whatever. So geographic location, is that important? Yeah, it is. Because what happened was that when I went back in to look at, even though I sell across all of North America and even sometimes out of the country, South America and Australia, so I'm not geographic based. But it turned out when I actually looked at my demographics, the geographic location that came up 70% of the time was California. What I found is that there's 500,000 kids, 500,000 kids that are in 4th grade that, according to the state curriculum, has to study the 21 California missions, the founding of the state of California, and they have to build a mission. And guess what? I'm the only company that has a kit out there where they can actually build an architecturally true replica of any one of the 21 missions. 70% of my revenue came from California. So guess what? That insight now told me that if I'm going to put my money into any type of extreme digital marketing or any type of marketing, 70% of it should be allocated just to the geographic location of California. Does that make sense? And you know what? Until I actually looked at the numbers, I had no idea that I was that heavily skewed to only one of 50 states. So geographic location may be important to you, and you may not realize it. And then affiliations, what people are affiliated with, groups and associations and companies and churches and trade organizations. The psychographics, and we've talked about the importance of the psychographics. And look at their purchase history. Did they buy from you in the past? What was their average sale? How much do they average spend? How often do they buy from you? Do you see that there's a pattern? If they buy from you once a year, maybe, and it's the same time of the year, maybe it's a birthday. Maybe that's your next campaign, is to your product's a great birthday gift and you didn't even think of it, or an anniversary gift, or back to school gift, or you see what I'm getting at? Look at the history. See how often, see when. But if you don't look at the numbers, you're not going to, and if you don't collect the numbers, you're not going to be able to see who your ideal buyer actually is. And geography, since people tend to live in neighborhoods of people with similar interests, like-minded people. Think about the other people in your neighborhood. Right out of the gate, you're probably in the same economic demographic. You're probably the same income based on the size and cost of your house. But you also have other things in common. You think about it. When you guys get together and you talk, what do you talk about? Well, think about what you have in common. Well, that's happening with your customers. So again, geographic location. There might be something in there, as the example that I just gave you with the state of California, where you're going to find some purchasing behaviors and lifestyle traits that are going to be really enlightening to you, to say the least. And then affiliations. Small business owners, for example, think of themselves in terms of industry affiliation, while entrepreneurs just think of themselves as entrepreneurs. So if even though most small business owners are entrepreneurs, in this example, where would the best place to be to do a display ad? Do you want to do it in a trade journal for the plumbers, or do you want to do it in Entrepreneur Magazine? Well, the trade journal for the plumbers are going to be better because they first think of themselves by trade, and then in the more broader sense, they think of themselves as entrepreneurs. So you know what? Testing is really important, and that's why the demographics are important. Where are you going to get the most, if your customers are small business owners, where are you going to get the best information returned from? Is it going to be a trade journal, or is it going to be an entrepreneur journal? So, and you know what? Maybe it's the other way around. And it's not necessarily just trades. It could be hobbies or other affiliations. Again, church groups, trade groups, any type of affiliations. And we talked a little bit about purchase history, but when did your customer last make a purchase? How often did they buy? How much do they typically spend? Did they use cash or credit cards? Some interesting facts. Credit card users tend to have a higher average of purchase price. They spend more money when they use credit cards than if they use cash. So if you got a brick and mortar company, you want to kind of encourage credit card transactions, even though you're going to pay 1, 2, or 2.5, up to 2.5% on your credit cards, because they're going to actually spend a lot more. But also keep in mind that credit card users have a higher tendency to return the merchandise than does cash users. That's kind of unusual, wouldn't you think? And I think maybe the psychology there is that if you're making a cash transaction, it's paid for, the deal is done, there's no more there is no more transactions. You're not going to see it come back at you a month from now. You've already paid for it. Where with a credit card, you haven't paid for it yet. So if you return it, you won't have to pay for it. So I think cash transactions are just more personal and more satisfying and more complete. But take a look at your the patterns of your customers, because again, if you study that information, if you look at it, you're going to find a lot of really good, valuable information hidden in there. And then, psychographics, there's a ton of, now again, I want you to go out and look for some of the other videos that are out here that talk about psychological hot buttons and pushing your psychological hot buttons of your customers. I mean, I really love this stuff, and even though it may not seem to be directly related to extreme digital marketing, it really is, because I can give you the best tools. I can give you a saw, a hammer, and some nails and a pile of wood, but you're not going to build a beautiful home. If I teach you how to build a beautiful home, and if I give you examples, and if I teach you how to do the architectural and the actual construction, you're going to build a beautiful home. So it's not just about having the tools. It's about having some system, some knowledge behind of how those tools best are used. So in this case, psychological or psychographics refers to personality and emotional behavior linked to purchase choices. And really, psychographics is not necessarily a Salvador Dali painting like you see in the top right. That is a psychographic. But it also, has to do with some of these like personality evaluations. Are they risk takers, risk avoiders, impulsive, decisives, inclusives, methodicals? And that comes from the self personality evaluation. And you know what's really weird? If you can get a couple of your customers just for fun to take one of these personality evaluation tools, which really only takes a few minutes, and all they have to do is a couple of check boxes on some list of words, not only when you give it back to them, they're going to get some insights that are going to be really valuable to them. Because they work. They work. But even more importantly, if you can get a psychological profile of a dozen of your customers, oh my gosh, do you know what that's worth? I mean, a real psychological profile of 12 of your customers. So think about that. Okay, so that's a little bit beyond demographics. I'll bet that when you opened up this video that you thought you pretty much knew everything there was to know about demographics. And I hope that I've given you some new insights and a different way of looking at demographics, and also the importance of demographics, the importance of, first of all, gathering them from all the different sources, and then looking at them, chopping them up, running some analysis, some statistics, looking for patterns. The information's there. You just have to use it. So again, thank you for listening. Kick back, grab yourself another cup of coffee, and take a look at some of the other videos that we have here at Extreme Digital Marketing. This has been Lon Safko, author of the Social Media Bible, here live from Extreme Digital Marketing.